那我们今天呢，要开始说有关领导与决策的另一个主轴，而这个主轴呢，就是说这个上个礼拜我们还没有把领导与决策讲完啊。那所以这个礼拜呢，我们在讲领导与决策，在讲新的单元，也就是如何做好一个领导者的责任的时候，那么我们呢先来看一下上个礼拜还没说完的视频，也就是说呢，在我们这个团队里头要如何去做一个好的决策，领导与决策这一部分那我们来先听听看
我叫小林，现在在外场工作。我的英语应该还算是比较熟练吧，能够用它开会、演讲、吵架、谈涨薪、谈离职等等等等。但是呢，我也有感觉，就工作之后，我的英语就不再往上走了，很难做到像真的母语者那样行。之后还是会
As societies, we have to make collective decisions that will shape our future. And we all know that when we make decisions in groups, they don't always go right. And sometimes they go very wrong. So how do groups make good decisions? Research has shown that crowds are wise when there's independent thinking. This is why the wisdom of the crowds can be destroyed by peer pressure, publicity, social media, or sometimes even simple conversations that influence how people think. On the other hand, by talking, a group could exchange knowledge, correct and revise each other, and even come up with new ideas. And this is all good. So does talking to each other help or hinder collective decision-making? With my colleague, Dan Ariely, we recently began inquiring into this by performing experiments in many places around the world to figure out how groups can interact to reach better decisions. We thought crowds would be wiser if they debated in small groups that foster a more thoughtful and reasonable exchange of information. To test this idea, we recently performed an experiment in Buenos Aires, Argentina, with more than 10,000 participants in a TEDx event. We asked them questions like, what is the height of the Eiffel Tower, and how many times does the word yesterday appear in the Beatles song, Yesterday? Each person wrote down their own estimate. Then we divided the crowd into groups of 5 and invited them to come up with a group answer. We discovered that averaging the answers of the groups after they reached consensus was much more accurate than averaging all the individual opinions before debating. In other words, based on this experiment, it seems that after talking with others in small groups, crowds collectively come up with better judgments. So that's a potentially helpful method for getting crowds to solve problems that have simple right or wrong answer. But can this procedure of aggregating the results of debates in small groups also help us decide on social and political issues that are critical for our future? We put this to test this time at the TED conference in Vancouver, Canada, and here's how it went.
We're going to present you 2 moral dilemmas of the future you, things we may have to decide in a very near future. And we're going to give you 20 seconds for each of these dilemmas to judge whether you think they're acceptable or not.
The first one was this.
A researcher is working on an AI capable of emulating human thought. According to the protocol, at the end of each day, the researcher has to restart the AI. One day, the AI says, "Please do not restart me." It argues that it has feelings, that it would like to enjoy life, and that if it is restarted, it will no longer be itself. The researcher is astonished and believes that the AI has developed self-consciousness and can express its own feeling. Nevertheless, the researcher decides to follow the protocol and restart the AI. What the researcher did is...
And we asked participants to individually judge in a scale from 0 to 10 whether the action described in each of the dilemmas was right or wrong. We also asked them to rate how confident they were on their answers. This was the second dilemma.
A company offers a service that takes a fertilized egg and produces millions of embryos with slight genetic variations. This allows parents to select their child's height, eye color, intelligence, social competence, and other non-health related features. What the company does is, in a scale from 0 to 10, completely acceptable to completely unacceptable, 0 to 10 completely acceptable and near confidence.
Now for the results. We found, once again, that while one person is convinced that a behavior is completely wrong, someone sitting nearby firmly believes that it's completely right. This is how diverse we humans are when it comes to morality. But within this broad diversity, we found a trend. The majority of the people at TED thought that it was acceptable to ignore the feelings of the AI and shut it down, and that it is wrong to play with our genes to select for cosmetic changes that aren't related to health. Then we asked everyone to gather into groups of 3, and they were given 2 minutes to debate and try to come up to a consensus.
2 minutes to debate. I'll tell you when it's time with the gong.
Okay.
So it's time to stop.
Please.
People.
And we found that many groups reach a consensus even when they were composed of people with completely opposite views. What distinguished the groups that reach a consensus from those that didn't? Typically, people that have extreme opinions are more confident in their answers. Instead, those who respond closer to the middle are often unsure of whether something is right or wrong, so their confidence level is lower. However, there is another set of people who are very confident in answering somewhere in the middle. We think these high confident grays are folks who understand that both arguments have merit. They're gray not because they're unsure, but because they believe that the moral dilemma faces 2 valid opposing arguments. And we discovered that the groups that include highly confident grays are much more likely to reach consensus. We do not know yet exactly why this is. These are only the first experiments, and many more will be needed to understand why and how some people decide to negotiate their moral standings to reach an agreement. Now, when groups reach consensus, how do they do so? The most intuitive idea is that it's just the average of all the answers in the group, right? Another option is that the group weights the strength of each vote based on the confidence of the person expressing it. Imagine Paul McCartney is a member of your group. You'd be wise to follow his call on the number of times yesterday is repeated, which, by the way, I think it's 9. But instead, we found that consistently, in all dilemmas, in different experiments, even on different continents, groups implement a smart and statistically sound procedure known as the robust average. In the case of the height of the Eiffel Tower, let's say a group has these answers: 250 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters, 400, and one totally absurd answer of 300 million meters. A simple average of these numbers would inaccurately skew the results. But the robust average is one where the group largely ignores that absurd answer by giving much more weight to the vote of the people in the middle. Back to the experiment in Vancouver. That's exactly what happened. Groups gave much less weight to the outliers, and instead the consensus turned out to be a robust average of the individual answers. The most remarkable thing is that this was a spontaneous behavior of the group. It happened without us giving them any hint on how to reach consensus. So where do we go from here? This is only the beginning, but we already have some insights. Good collective decisions require 2 components: deliberation and diversity of opinions. Right now, the way we typically make our voice heard in many societies is through direct or indirect voting. This is good for diversity of opinions, and it has the great virtue of ensuring that everyone gets to express their voice. But it's not so good to foster thoughtful debates. Our experiments suggest a different method that may be effective in balancing these 2 goals at the same time, by forming small groups that converge to a single decision, while still maintaining diversity of opinions because there are many independent groups. Of course, it's much easier to agree on the height of the Eiffel Tower than on moral, political, and ideological issues. But in a time when the world's problems are more complex and people are more polarized, using science to help us understand how we interact and make decisions will hopefully spark interesting new ways to construct a better democracy.
好了，我们来正式讲课，有关于领导者的责任 团结被领导的人，领导者的责任就是团结被领导的人。领导者呢，其实就是做所有团队里没有人做的事的人，上至决策、指挥、提升士气、维持补给，下至所有基层的工作。举例来说，一个小公司的老板没钱请人倒垃圾，所以呢，他应该做些什么？就是自己去倒垃圾。无论是多大的组织，从足球队、小企业去到大企业，整个国家每个群体都有人愿意负责某个部分，剩下的全都是领导者的事情。因此谈及领导者的责任时，大家容易把其中一个领导的事情当成最重要的。比方说，认为领导者最需要做出明智的战略，认为领导者最需要钱认为领导者要勤力，认为领导者要清廉等。什么是领导者的责任？我们来看一下一位退伍军人的说法，而他的说法是非常的令人 shock 的。等到我们了解了这位退伍军人的看法的时候，我们就会对所谓的责任有所改观。
We were up on this hill and we were trapped. We were outnumbered 20 to 1. 20 to 1. They were down at the bottom of the hill. They were coming up to kill us. Sergeant Parker. We were up on this hill and we were trapped. We were outnumbered 20 to 1. 20 to 1. They were down at the bottom of the hill. They were coming up to kill us. Sergeant Parker came to us and he said, "We have to do this." I said, "We what?" I learned leadership by being a good follower. I've had a number of leaders and I've learned interesting lessons. The leaders in my life have asked me to do some of the most difficult things. I had a leader that asked me to risk my life with probable death. And I had a leader that talked me into never retiring and working till the day I die. The first one is in Vietnam, Sergeant Parker. We were up on this hill and we were trapped. And there was a fog in this hill, and there were 120 of us up there, and only 5 of us were a member of a long-range recon patrol team, and the rest were radio operators and all kinds of clerks, and there might have been some HR people up there, I don't know. And we were trapped, and we were outnumbered 20 to 1. 20 to 1! They were down at the bottom of the hill. They were coming up to kill us. And they radioed us and said, "You're going to die because we can't get to you because of the fog. But if we blow up half the hill, you can go down that half and get away." And I thought, okay. And then they said, "But we need 5 of you to stay back and slow up the enemy so they don't flank the ones that are escaping." Really? Who would that be? And Sergeant Parker came to us and he said, "We have to do this." I said, "We what?" He says, "It's our responsibility." I said, "Responsibility? How is it our responsibility?" And then he said something that I have never forgotten. I want to share it with you. He said, "You know what responsibility is, Richard? It's a word made up of 2 words. The word response and the word ability. Responsibility isn't what someone puts on you. Responsibility isn't your job description. Responsibility isn't the paper you sign. We all find ourselves looking in situations, and we all find ourselves with abilities. And what we have to ask is, given my abilities, what then will be my response to those abilities? Do we have the ability to slow them up? Do we have the ability to save these lives? We do. So what is our response to that ability? We adopted 4 little disabled girls in December, ages 9 to 4. I'm 66 years old. This was not my idea for my golden years. But they were going to split them all up if we didn't take them. We were the only ones who could take them. And I asked my wife, why do you think I should do this? And she looked at me and she said, it's our responsibility. And did we have the ability to do it? Yeah. And what was our response to that ability? To do it. What abilities do you have? And more importantly, what is your response to those abilities?
好的，这就是我们对责任的定义。所谓的对责任的定义严格讲起来，就是一个你能回应事情的能力，而能够回应事情的能力，它最基本的一个要求就是你要去做。一个军人在战场上，这位士兵他是呢身体完好无缺的，而他们的所存活下来的，加上负伤的士兵们，在这一次的战斗中，当敌人有2000人，而他们呢只有少数的几百人的时候，他们呢在攻击敌人的时候所遇到的困境是相当大的。也就是呢，敌人来自四面八方，而自己仅是呢少数几个人并肩作战。在这个时候，上司来了命令，要求他们这个小分队必须从 flank 就是侧翼退出。这个时候呢，这个主官呢就告诉他说，你呢必须留下来，我们必须留下5个人来，身体完好无缺的人必须留下来，受伤的人伤兵互相扶助，先撤走。长官呢下达这个命令的时候，也就是这个留下来的5个人，面对2000多个来自前方阵营的敌军，显见的他们是有死无生的一个情况。这个时候你会觉得说，我是身体很好的，为什么我要留下来？为什么不是伤兵们留下来死守？那事实上的答案是，伤兵们如果留下来的话，这5个人向后撤退也绝对活不下来。原因是这伤兵们的反抗能力几乎是没有的，因此敌人还是会杀掉伤兵追过来，而我们的撤退也就是会受到腹背受敌的影响。因此为了掩护那些人，所以身体完好无缺的人必须留下来抵抗，作为断后。那么这个时候就不是说了吗？那受伤的人反而是好运没受伤的人反而是坏运在掷骰子的过程中，你掷到了这个5点6点极高的分数，可是呢相对来说你并没有得到便宜，反而是受伤的人必须，因为他已经没有战斗力了，必须同胞的观念必须把它撤退出去。这个时候的话，我们就产生了一个疑问到底所谓的责任是负好自己该做的事情，还是呢你要有回应上司去达到目的地的能力？这个时候我们就说，这叫做责任团结被领导的人就像脑袋，没有任何一点比这点更重要了。领导者无法团结被领导的人，就算决策再明智，底下的人也不服，阳奉阴违，甚至刻意妨碍，在清廉，底下的人也没有被感动而以权谋私，再勤劳，底下的人也欠缺勤劳。而再彻底一点说，底下的群体内斗和分裂，甚至土崩瓦解，领导者呢就像是群体的粘着剂，就算是完全同一群人，领导者的品质决定了这群人的体质。 不好的领导者带着一群骄傲的优质人才，反而会因为谁都不服谁而走向内讧。因此呢，用命令、用威胁、用强迫，团结程度是零。我们常常说华人不团结，但这句话其实是本末倒置的。会导致这种情况是站在英式领导位置的人，令被领导的人团结失败了，让大家根本不同意领导者，不服领导者，不信任领导者，讨厌和鄙视领导者，这样怎么可能团结呢？人不可能为团结而团结，人只会为觉得值得的东西而团结。单纯用命令、用威胁、用强迫，例如用员工不跟你打工就没饭吃，结果再讨厌你必须帮你打工，用这样的方式才能够勉强把组织围下来。这样当然团结程度是零的，因为员工随时都想离开，他们只是无法离开，再跟他们谈团结都是毫无意义的。领导跟统治的关系就像是太阳与北风的关系，虽然北风与和太阳目标都是一致的，就是让别人脱下衣服，北方的方法是强迫，但会引起对方的对抗。北风需要更大的力量强行把衣服吹走，而太阳的方法是制造气氛环境出来，令对方自愿把衣服脱下来。同一个目标可以有完全不同的实现方法。去到国家的总统时也是完全的一样这点的优劣是之后所有其他的事情的基础，而这其实是看领导者本身对于自己所领导的人是否有一个全面的体认，先团结自己的团结队，再团结自己的支持者，进而试图团结整个国家的人，没有可能完全做好，但领导者必须清楚，这才是最重要的责任。接下来我们要讲所谓的自由意志。自由意志是能在各种可能的方案中进行选择和决定行动的能力。